My name is Sumeet Bahl. I am an interventional radiologist in Brooklyn, and I know the majority of everyone here is an IMG, as am I. And I'm proud to say that because I think we can all agree we come with a little bit of an extra hustle because we have to. And it's something that you should be proud of, and you're going to create a lot of opportunities, and that's what I want to talk about today. Just a quick background on me if you didn't get to see the post about my history, and just so you can kind of get an idea of who I am and how this all started. So I graduated from undergrad at Emory University in Atlanta in 2005, and I did not get into med school a couple of times actually. My grades were pretty good, but the MCAT was a very, very challenging exam for me, and a lot of you may have had that experience. And so I applied at the end, toward the end of college. It didn't work out, and I was like, well, I've got to find a way to make this happen. This is what I wanted to do since I was a little kid, and I feel like a lot of you probably felt that same way. So when I graduated from Emory in 2005, I went to New York Medical College and got a master's in physiology there because I was told, let's take another opportunity and see how you can do. Well, I graduated number one in my class after 2 years with this master's in physiology, and you'd think at that point, okay, this person should be able to go in because I was taking the same class as the med students who were in that same school, and it did not work out for me. I could not handle the MCAT. It was the same thing. I was not the best standardized test taker. It was really more of an issue where I just developed a fear of exams even at that point. And some of you may have been through that particular scenario. So the grades were good, and I was like, what am I going to do next? So graduate from grad school, and then I decided to work in the Emory Mind Body program down at Emory University in Atlanta. I went back there, and I did research, actually under the leadership of the Dalai Lama. And actually got to see him not too far from me at the end of that research, which is pretty cool. It was on meditation. Thought that's going to help me a lot. And so I knew I was going to have about 1 to 2 years off between trying to get into med school again. So I worked at the Emory Transplant Center, and I did clinical research in transplant surgery, thinking I really want to be a surgeon at this point. So I applied. This is my third round of applying to U.S. med schools. And my grades in college were pretty good. My grades in grad school were fantastic, but the biggest challenge was the MCAT score. And I had great letters of recommendation, all that type of stuff. Ultimately, none of the U.S. med schools worked out. So I was at a decision point, and I was like, I've got to make this work. So I applied to St. George's University, and I know there's a lot of SGU students or maybe some graduates here who are watching this right now and know this story, but I asked myself, has anyone from SGU ever become a neurosurgeon? Because that's what I wanted to be, and I looked it up, and that was the case. There were neurosurgeons produced from our school, so I was determined to make that happen, and I applied to SGU. I got in, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. So I had 4 years between college and med school. Graduated college in 2005. Undergrad in 2007, and started SGU in 2009. And I know for those of you who are there right now, it looks totally different than I remember, and I hope I get to go back to Grenada at some point, maybe while you're there, and I can go teach a course on interventional radiology. I'd love to try to do that. But started in 2009 and had my 2 years in Grenada. They were incredible, made a lot of good friends, and took step one. And then I did all of my clinical rotations actually at Brooklyn Hospital Center, where some of you may actually rotate. And that's currently where I am an IR attending now. And I know there's not a lot of exposure to interventional radiology for a lot of you, whatever your various schools are. But it's a field I'm very proud of. And it's a very difficult field to get into, as a lot of you may know. Especially, even just being a US grad, it's very difficult to get in as an IMG. Not impossible, and that's what I want to talk about. And not just about going in interventional radiology, but give, hopefully you find some inspiration in my story for what you're capable of no matter where you go to school. So I ultimately, I graduated from med school, and I was applying for neurosurgery, as I mentioned, because my intention when I went to SGU was that I could become a neurosurgeon, and that's what I went for. So some of you may like this story. It was challenging, but I was dead set on being a neurosurgeon. So I did 3 rotations in neurosurgery during my 4th year, and I did one of them at Brooklyn Hospital, and the person I did it with is a very close friend of mine now, and he was my first mentor in neurosurgery. I rotated with him, did a lot of spine surgery there. Then I went to Albany Medical College in Albany, New York, and that was pretty rough, to say the least. I would start my day I would wake up at 3:30 in the morning, be at the hospital by 5, work for about 38 hours straight, basically no breaks. They would teach me to operate. I would open the skull. I would get all the way down to the dura in the brain, and I would even get to close at the end. That's how proficient they make you. You're working constantly. It was nonstop from 5 a.m. to about 7 p.m. the next day. You go to sleep for about 5 hours and wake up the next day. I did that day in and day out, no weekends off. And that was for a whole month. After that, I got an away rotation at Emory University, where I told you I did my undergrad and some research, and I did that for a whole month. Same type of schedule. I lost 18 pounds by the end of it. You would think that, okay, this person is gonna make it in neurosurgery. The letters were good, the recommendations were good, everything was set, and I still did not match in neurosurgery. So what do you do at that point? You've wanted to be a neurosurgeon your whole life. It doesn't work out. So now this was the tipping point for me. I've got to find another way. So what I did was I after not making it in neurosurgery, I had nowhere to go. But my backup was prelim surgery, with the intention of being able to reapply for neurosurgery. I matched prelim surgery at Rutgers University in Newark. It was a big academic center. It was a very, very busy center, and I was proud to have gotten that. And so my goal was to be able to try to get in neurosurgery. Now, this is where the crazy stuff happens. Call it hard work, call it a bit of manifestation, but this is where I want everyone to know that things are doable. And the key here I want to make everyone remember is you have to use the human element. No one watching this is just a score. No one watching this is just a letter of recommendation or how you did on your rotations. This is you are a human being, and the people you are applying to, they are human beings for, the ones who are going to be reviewing your applications. Okay. And that's what's important to remember. So when I was trying to figure out what to do, that week that I did not match into neurosurgery, I was heartbroken. This is all I wanted for my entire life, was to be a neurosurgeon. And as you know, as I mentioned, 36 hours for 3 months straight, lost 18 pounds. I was engaged, never saw my fiance at that time. And we were trying to figure out, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And so I actually tried to soap into radiology, because that's why I was like, you know what? I'm done with this idea of neurosurgery. I got to figure out, what am I going to do after my prelim gen surg year that I'd matched. I already knew I'd matched, but I didn't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my time. So I tried to soap into a couple of radiology programs. None of those worked out. It was maybe 1 or 2 phone calls I got. And you know what? It worked out for the better. And that's going to be a theme of this too. Sometimes the best thing in life is not getting what you want. And you may not think that now as you're trying to go through the process, but believe me, it's very true. So, and the end of my story is going to be a testament to that. So I didn't match in radiology that week, but I had my prelim surgery set. So here's the thing. The week after I did not match, I had a 2-week rotation in radiology. As a lot of you may realize, during your 3rd year clinical rotations, how much radiology exposure do you get? Pretty much minimal to none, right? You're doing pediatrics and surgery and internal medicine and family medicine and all the core rotations, but very minimal exposure to radiology. So this is my first foray in radiology the week after I didn't match, and I rotated in the same place that I was at for my 3rd year, Brooklyn Hospital. It was my first exposure to radiology, and while I was sitting there, it was interesting, but the operator in me, the person who was desiring neurosurgery was still in there. And I saw these two guys walking by wearing scrubs down on the floor where radiology is, but they were holding lead. And I was like, who is this? And I walked into the what we call the angiography suite, or the IR suite, where we do our operations. We don't really call it an operating room if you're not familiar with IR. I walked in there and I was like, what do you guys do? And they said, well, we're interventional radiologists. And that's the first exposure I even had. So here I am, having not matched in neurosurgery, never exposed to IR, and these two interventional radiologists are telling me what they do. So I said, do you mind? I'm supposed to be on the radiology rotation, but do you mind if I hang out here in IR? And that's what I did. I got to see procedure after procedure. Interventional radiology is a minimally invasive image-guided procedure. That's basically what it is. And we're using CAT scans, we're using x-rays, we're using ultrasound to do our procedures rather than having to do surgery. And I was seeing basically magic happen in this room, and I was like, this is what I want to do for my life. I was already set with a prelim surgery residency. I got to figure out what I'm going to do. So after that, after graduating from St. George's in 2013, I went to my prelim surgery year, and I was set on applying for radiology with the intention of going in interventional radiology at that time. Neurosurgery was kind of out of my mind by this point. So here's where it gets pretty cool. I worked probably, definitely hit it to the max, the 80 hours a week that you're working as a surgery resident. That's what I did. And I was newly married at the time, and I was like, I gotta hustle. I gotta find a way to become an interventional radiologist, even though I never really see my wife. I'm working 80 hours a week, operating, taking care of way too many patients at a time that I can even say, but somehow figured it out. And I applied for radiology. I had a vascular surgeon write one of my letters of recommendation. I had a friend who was a radiologist. I had one of my interventional radiology mentors from where I rotated write me a letter, and I had that neurosurgeon write me a letter. So I had a combination of it. Because some of it's character, some of it is your scores, and some of it is how you're doing on the rotation. So I was able to get actually over 20 interviews my intern year in radiology, and this is after multiple failures in scores and all this type of stuff at this point, but I was reasonably competitive enough for radiology. And with those 20 interviews, I was able to get my opportunity to go into to radiology. So I applied to my number one program. One of the programs I applied to it's called St Lukes Roosevelt Hospital. It's in Manhattan, New York, not far from where I live now. That hospital, as I was applying to it, if you understand how radiology works, radiology is what we call a 1+4. It's like anesthesiology. You've got your intern year, which is what I was doing in prelim surgery, but then you've got your 4 years of radiology after that. Well, here I am, a surgical intern, and I don't have a place to go after this year. So I'm concerned I'm going to be having to take a year off after my prelim surgery. Well, turns out that my number one program, where I interviewed at, instead of taking 5 residents for the incoming year, they opened up 2 spots for that incoming year, such that they were basically taking 2 people who were already interns. So now they're taking 7 spots. I was like, I have to get this spot. I've already had 4 years between college and med school. I don't want to take any more time off. I don't want to take another year. What am I going to do? I could do research. I could be a device representative for a company for a year. I was like, I got to make it. So I called that program. I called multiple programs, actually. And that's the thing. When people are putting you on wait lists, when people are not giving you the time of day, some people won't even interview you. You're going to be happy to know this. I actually reversed a no on an interview. This is a side note, where I actually got the no, but I really, really, really wanted to interview with that program. So I called them and I said, look, is it possible you can take me off that no list? And then turns out, I think a couple of days later, I got a phone call that says, hey, we're glad you called. Turns out that the program director looked at your application again, and we'd like to bring you in for an interview. So I got to do that. So again, the human element. You're not just a no, you're not just your scores. You can actually, flip no's into yeses. So that's a side note. But I was just dead set on this program, St. Lukes Roosevelt, and I ranked them number one. I ended up matching there at St. Lukes Roosevelt. It was my number one program out of 20. Now, if you can imagine, a very highly sought after program like this in Manhattan, New York, is really hard to get, even for a US grad. So now I've got one as an IMG. And all of this came from pushing, using the human element. And where the human element came in, the interventional radiologist at my hospital in New Jersey was a huge advocate of me. Even in my 80-hour-a-week surgical internship, I would go down, and if I had an IR patient who needed if I had a patient in my surgery, residency who needed an IR procedure, didn't matter if I hadn't slept the night before. I was staying there to watch that IR procedure, and I wanted to see it through. And this interventional radiologist, the head of interventional radiology at the time, saw me going in there all the time. He was like, "You should go home. You've been up way too long." I was like, "This is what I want to do for my life. I got to find a way to do it." And so, as I mentioned, he wrote me a letter, and one of his colleagues in the hospital also advocated for me to get into St. Lukes Roosevelt. And all that said and done, just using human connections, just saying, I'm a human being, I'm not just a number, I'm not just a resident, I'm a person who wants this opportunity. That's how I basically sold it. I got that spot, my number one spot at St. Lukes Roosevelt Hospital. And what was so awesome about that, and it gets even crazier, at the time that I got into St. Lukes Roosevelt Hospital and realized that I did not have to take a year off between my intern year and my me getting to start my radiology residency. Not only did that happen, did I get that spot. That hospital was actually bought by a big hospital system here in New York City, and if you don't know it, it's called Mount Sinai Hospital. Mount Sinai Hospital is a huge powerhouse in interventional radiology. One of the more sought after fellowship programs. Now, I'm just applying for a residency. Well, it turns out when I got into St. Lukes Roosevelt that year, Mount Sinai had bought that hospital. So then it got rebranded to Mount Sinai St. Lukes Roosevelt, as I was a resident there. And here I am in a radiology residency, and it was called Mount Sinai St. Lukes Roosevelt. Later on, it became Mount Sinai West, because it was basically the east side of the hospital system. Mount Sinai East is the main campus. And so here I am, an SGU grad, 5 MCATs. SGU grad, 5 MCATs, 3 US rejections for medical schools. And here I am at one of the sister hospitals of Mount Sinai Hospital. And when I got to my PGY 4 year, when I was applying to interventional radiology fellowship, I basically became an internal candidate to the Mount Sinai Hospital's interventional radiology program. During my radiology residency, I got to know the program director at Mount Sinai. He is someone who I adore, and I love this guy, and he really believed in me. Didn't care where I went to med school, didn't care about any of that. Again, why? Because it was all about the work ethic and the hustle. And I used to go to the main campus and do procedures with him and the other IR attendings. They used to come over to our campus, and basically they just knew me so well by that point. Here I am, an internal candidate. And then I'm happy to say, in 2018, years after rejections and everything, I started my interventional radiology fellowship at Mount Sinai Hospital as an SGU grad. That is statistically, you could say not supposed to happen. And the reason I'm doing this right now is to tell everyone that it is doable. It's not going to happen for everyone necessarily, and not everyone wants to go into a crazy competitive field like IR, but that's what I was set on wanting to do. A lot of you are just hoping that you get your family medicine residency. A lot of you are hoping you get your psychiatry residency. They may not necessarily be competitive on paper in terms of scores, but maybe your story puts a little chip on your shoulder and it's making you have to push that much harder. Well, I'm here to tell you that you are capable of it no matter which field, no matter what you want to do. And And so it turns out that when I graduated from Mount Sinai Interventional Radiology, it was a win that I still can't even comprehend to this day. As I was graduating, here's the other crazy part. My wife, she's actually an actor and dancer and filmmaker here in New York City. So she was like, we're not leaving New York. We're already here. We've been here for a long time. And I'm like, okay, you know what? New York's pretty cool. We can stay. Let's make this happen. So she was like, well, can we please try to find a job in New York? I'm like, yeah, I'm down. New York City is one of the most amazing cities in the world. We'll make it happen. So as I was nearing the end of my fellowship, one of my old mentors, one of the very people who introduced me into interventional radiology in that room in 2013 when I was graduating, he sent me a text message and he was like, are you looking for a job? I said, absolutely. He said, well, I've got a vacancy. Do you want to be my partner in the same hospital that you first discovered interventional radiology? I said, that would be awesome. And that's where I am right now. So it all came full circle. I'm at Brooklyn Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, the very hospital. Years before that, I was exposed to interventional radiology for the first time in my life. And that's where I'm an IR attending. I've been there for 2.5 years. And I want everyone to know that there is a life on the other side of your step 1 and step 2 and step 3. You can take multiple failures, multiple people telling you, no, you're not worthy of this, and you can turn that no into a yes. You can actually become whatever you want being an IMG. That is not a limiting factor here. As long as you have the human element, the hustle, use all of your connections. One thing I want to say is that people will often take a lot of med students who rotate with me, and if you happen to be from SGU by any chance, I know there's a lot of you from all over schools from all over the world, but if you happen to be from SGU and you rotate through Brooklyn Hospital, please come rotate with me. I'm more than happy to have you. I sit down with a lot of the students and have one-on-ones to share with you my story. A lot of you have heard it now, and let you know this is actually doable. Yeah, it's a field I'm very proud of, and and just being here has opened up so many opportunities for me and beyond medicine. And I've told a lot of people that just because you become a doctor and you go through residency and you go through fellowship and you become an attending, you may even be so much more than that. You may find branch points that just because you've got those 2 letters behind your name, they open up doors like you wouldn't even imagine. Right now, you're just trying to figure out, how am I going to get into residency? Then you're going to think, how am I going to get into fellowship? And I know you want to think it's over because you're like, oh, I'm an attending now. It's all done. It's great. How do I get patients? How do I compete with other services? It never really ends. The same concepts that I'm talking about now, the same hustle, all of that still has to be alive no matter where you are in your career. And it's opened up so many doors for me. And I've been able to actually, I work with the new mayor of New York City, his office directly, because I'm doing some new opportunities with them. Why? Because I'm a physician, and I'm still an SGU grad. I'm still an IMG. I don't know if you can see my shirt here. I'm working with a hip hop organization for spreading the plant-based diet. Why? Because I'm a physician, and it's the most pervasive form of pop culture in the world. We can improve patients' diet through diet and exercise, and they don't have to be on my operating table necessarily if I can prevent that. So you even have the opportunity to be a spokesperson for something. This all happens because you've got those 2 letters behind your name. So when you're stressed about step 1, step 2, step 3, and all that, if you use the human element and the hustle and you never stop believing in yourself, I promise you, this is doable. So that's my story. Does anyone have any questions? Is there anything I can answer now? Everyone got to hear it. Let me go back. Someone might have... Please start posting questions. I'm more than happy to answer them if you want to know more. I've got time for you. Not on call. Hello, is working as a surgical assistant considered USCE and help in family medicine? I'm not exactly sure what CE is. But if you're asking about family medicine, sure. I mean, it's going to expose you to, it's going to expose you. I mean, the more exposure you have is more of a life story. That's the idea, right? So as I said, you're collecting life stories here. This is not just about being, someone who takes an exam. A lot of you watching are going to, if you're med students already, you know how to study, and maybe you have challenges with it. I sure as heck did. But again, using your connections, using your life story, using all these opportunities around you, it's still going to open up doors. What else can I say? Looking for it. Oh, great. Someone can relate. My medical steps says they can relate. That's awesome. Any questions? What is SGU? SGU is St. George's University. It is in Grenada, in the West Indies. And that's where I went to med school. Does research fellowship help get into residency? Yes, it can. Depends on what kind of residency you're going into. If anyone is U.S. clinical experience. Okay, I'm going to answer that in a second. Thank you for the USCE thing, acronym. So it depends on your residency. I can say for interventional radiology, if you are an IMG and you're considering IR, research is super, super, super important because you can have stellar scores. I know people with, so just to give you an example, the average step 1 score for someone applying to what I'm in is definitely 240s plus, almost 250. But now, because some of you might not even taken the steps yet, and now it's pass fail, so that's totally different. But if you're currently applying, yeah, that's what you're looking for. Now, if you're an IMG, people might be looking at you and saying, okay, well, everyone's pass fail now. How do I separate you from everyone else? Because whether you're an IMG or US grad or wherever you're from, you're pass fail. So that's going to go on your letters. It's going to go on your clinical rotations. But this is where your research fellowship may help you. This is where the research is going to really be really important because it might separate you from some other people. Showing interest in a field early is a huge bonus to the field you're trying to go into, especially in the ones that are really specialized, like interventional radiology. How can you contact me? I can write my IG handle in the comments, and you can DM me. I do my best to respond to DMs as much as I can to try to help you out with that, because I really want, I want, if for every single person watching this can benefit from this and not one of you feels like you're going to slip through the cracks, because I know there's people watching this feeling like they're going to slip through the cracks, they're not going to make it. I promise you do not have to slip through the cracks. I thought I was going to. And we can be really honest. I was pretty close to near depression at one point because it was that challenging. I've gone through so much failure. And so you are not alone. If anyone's watching this and you're feeling like, you've been abused as a med student, people are giving you a hard time, whatever it is, I've been there. I saw it. Like I said, I worked 120 hours a week trying to get into neurosurgery. It was the best thing in my life not getting in. Because I found another way. I opened up another door. And everyone watching this can do that. What else? What else we got? What else do we have? Does working as an MA who basically does see patients look bad on residency application? No, not at all. Medical assistant? That doesn't look bad. I mean, you're around patients. There might be other opportunities for you that are more than being a medical assistant. But if that's your current opportunity, swing it however you want. If you made a big difference in someone's life as a medical assistant, use that in your personal statement. Like tell people what you did and be proud of that. I think that's part of your story. You're collecting stories. What else we got? How can we contact you for USCE? So for US clinical experience, that's got to be done through your school. Basically, your school has to advocate for you to be able to be there. Right now at Brooklyn Hospital, we have basically St. George's students, and we have ones from AUC, which is American University of the Caribbean. I don't think we have as many AUC students anymore, but St. George's by far. But but I don't think you can come in unless you're credentialed by your own school. Do you need a lot of research for diagnostic radiology? What other extracurriculars are helpful? So, depends. I would say that diagnostic radiology is becoming progressively more competitive, especially in the era of COVID, because a lot of people want to be able to work remotely. So if you want to work remotely and still be very comprehensive in your approach, because you really have to know every organ system, I think that it's just becoming progressively more competitive in that way. So research is very helpful. It's not a must. I didn't have a lot of it before I went in, but that was a number of years ago. But I would say that research is something that it shows that you're going the extra mile. It's another thing that if you know what area of research you want to do, it's really, really helpful. Extracurriculars that are helpful, I would say there's nothing in particular. I would say just do what really interests you. You have to be passionate about it. If you're going to tell people, like, don't do what I did on one of my neurosurgery interviews. I told you I'm going to be very candid with you. Big mistake. I did some research at one point. Because my brain kind of crapped out, I forgot what the final result in like the discussion section in the abstract. I even forgot what some of that was. I'd forgotten what some of the key details of the research were. My interviewer in neurosurgery had asked me that. I didn't know. It was the most awkward silence. It was like crickets chirping. Don't be that person. So really know your stuff. You know why I couldn't sell it? Because I wasn't really passionate about that research. But other interviews I did later on, the other opportunities I'm talking about that I've done as a physician now, have been because I was passionate about it. So whatever you do, the person who asked me about being a medical assistant, one of them who said, can I be a surgical tech, things like that. If you are passionate about it and it adds to your story, do it and sell it like it means everything to you. And people pay a lot more. They can see the fire in your eyes when they're sitting in front of you in an interview. That's really important. How did I study for Step 2 CK and Step 3? Step 2 CK was done between my 3rd and 4th year of med school. It's kind of challenging, I guess, because you're in the middle of rotations, but you figure it out. You're basically just doing your rotations during the day and coming home in the evenings and having to study for it. There's not really, when you're a med student, it's kind of hard to ask for time off. You could try to swing it depending on the rotation, but it's pretty difficult. Step 3 I did during my PGY2 year, so my first diagnostic radiology year. I just basically had to balance being a new radiology resident and not knowing what the heck I was looking at on the scans and trying to study for Step 3 in my first few weeks of radiology residency. But I don't know how you do on Step 2 CK and Step 3. How you need to do is going to be dependent on how you did on Step 1. Again, if you've taken Step 1 already and it's score based, maybe you don't need to do as well on CK in Step 3. But if you are someone taking Step 1 in today's era, you're basically trying to do it through just pass-fail. So then if you're an IMG, you really need to do well on Step 2 CK and Step 3, I would imagine. And in that case, yeah, you really need to have some reasonably stellar scores if you're going for something competitive. But remember, even if you don't have the most amazing scores, you can still make it, provided you do the things I've been talking about. Contact the people in your school. That person will know someone who knows someone. Do what we're doing right now. We're connected through Instagram. I gave you my handle. You can contact me. I can answer more questions for you. Again, it's just emailing people. I cold emailed people. I called offices just, hey, can you interview me? I haven't heard back. I told you I reversed a no into a yes. So just keep doing that. Don't let anyone tell you, oh yeah, I haven't heard back. Well, remember, you want them more than they want you. They've got people knocking on their doors. So keep pushing for that, despite whatever your scores are. Thank you for your story. It's extremely inspirational. Thank you so much for watching. Does a gap in med school matter? It was due to war out of control. Well, I'm sorry that you had to experience something like that. I can only imagine what that's like. I know there are people here coming from areas where that is a very real part of your life. But if the gap in your med school is because of that reason, I would hope that whoever you're applying to is sensitive to that, because they really should be, and that's pretty terrible if they're not. If your scores are otherwise reasonable and you've got good recommendations and you're doing whatever you can, everything on paper kind of checks out, then again, use that as part of your story. Who wouldn't want to have someone like you in their residency program if you had to endure something like that, because they know you can handle the work hours and they can know you can handle multiple things at one time. That's sort of what the nature of life is in probably where you're from and going through med school. So kudos to you for getting this far, and I hope that people are understanding about that. Does a medical scribe job count for U.S. clinical experience? Not really, in terms of clinical experience, because you're kind of doing what other people are. I mean, it depends. It depends on how active of a role you are. If you're taking an active role and you're trying to be very engaged in whoever is dictating to you what they want you to say, sure, yeah, definitely. If you're just sitting there writing and kind of passively watching everything go on, it's not going to be as engaged. So if you are an active participant, then I would say, yeah, use those as part of your story. Also, what you could probably do is, when you're not on the job, like if you're not currently a scribe, you've finished your hours, stay later to be an active participant in the service that you're being a scribe for. And those people should be able to write you letters, and you're going to learn through the process. Why do you think someone should pursue interventional radiology? Because it's the coolest field in medicine. I mean, you get to do minimally invasive image-guided procedures. There are people who can't get surgery or don't want surgery, and we are a very reasonable, awesome alternative. I'm getting to do stuff that I didn't even, it's like science fiction. It's kind of even hard to imagine some of the things we're doing. I'll give you a quick 30-second example. There was a lady who had a terrible DVT. I don't know if any of you know what phlegmatia cerulea dolens is. It's basically a DVT, deep vein thrombosis, that is so bad that it's causing arterial compromise. Her leg turned blue. She had very weak pulses, severe pain in her foot. The foot was cool, and you're like, that shouldn't be a DVT, but the arteries were so compromised by the venous disease. So basically, I was called in to do a thrombectomy, which is basically suck out all of the blood clot from the veins using a puncture in the back of her knee, about maybe this small, really tiny. And after a couple of hours of work, all the clot was gone. She's on a heparin drip and doing a ton better, has all of her motor function back. She didn't need a big open surgery to get that done. It was through a tiny puncture and holding compression behind her knee, and that was it. And I was, able to save a limb and save her life, because she would have gone into septic shock if you didn't fix that. It's just worse than a DVT. So that's doable in interventional radiology, and that's why I think it's a pretty awesome field. And again, I'm an IMG. I'm a real-life IMG talking to you right now, who went through, and again, if you're just tuning in, 5 MCATs, 3 U.S. medical school rejections, and still went to one of the most competitive interventional radiology programs in the country, and still get to live and work in New York City, and it still worked out. So if you're watching this, you can do that too. Hi, I'm a US IMG hoping to apply into ortho this year, but it's extremely difficult. I was wondering what you recommend for IMGs who don't match. Research fellowship, intern outside the US, prelim. Okay, so ortho is about one of the most competitive specialties you can go into, even more than interventional radiology now. And so you want to know what IMGs who don't match should do? Yeah, prelim year. You were considering a research fellowship? No. I would say a prelim year in general surgery, if you can get that, would be pretty awesome, because you then get to work with some of the orthopedic surgeons directly, get to know them, get letters of recommendation, show that you're reasonably savvy with your hands. You don't get to do that too much as an intern, to be honest, because you're doing a lot of scut work, not gonna lie. I did a lot of that, but show people that you are reasonably good with your hands, and more importantly than anything else, you can balance multiple things at one time, and that you can work well with people. A lot of people think that it's the scores and this, that, it's stuff on paper. One of the most important elements is, are you cool? Are you good with working with other people? Do people want to work in the trenches with you? Do they want to work alongside you when you're sleep deprived, you're food deprived, and it's been a long day? That's what people really want to know. And if you can show that in your surgical intern year, you might open up doors to going into ortho even though you're an IMG. That's probably one of the most important elements. Stay clinical and show that you're cool to work with. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. When applying for medical school, do we include experiences from undergrad, or is it just experiences from med school that count on our resume? When you're applying for med school, do you include experiences from undergrad? Well, I guess if you're applying for med school, you wouldn't have med school experience. I'm a little confused by that question, but if you're applying for residency, that might be what you're trying to say. If you're applying for residency, if you had an undergrad experience that was significant enough that it helped turn you into the person you are today, then definitely talk about that. The small stuff where you might have volunteered back in even like high school or things like that, not as important. But if it was something that was really, really significant for you, I would say that that's something that's worth mentioning in your undergrad career. For example, when I was applying to residency, it was still relevant that I did a summer volunteer opportunity with one of my best friends in India. So I was working in a hospital out there. That was undergrad, but it was still relevant for the residency program. So no, I did get questions about that. It's, sometimes like, what was it like working in 110 degrees and having to be up early in the morning and go home late and, work in that situation. So does being a radiology resident in home country help in matching into radiology? Yeah, definitely. I know a number of people. This is from Mustafa_journey to answer your question. Yes, that is actually really helpful. There are people who I know who were radiology residents in their home country, and then they applied, and it was super, super helpful for them getting a radiology residency here in the U.S. It was kind of cool. Because this guy he was a year ahead of me in radiology residency, he was brilliant because he was radiology trained in his country. So it was like, I loved having him as my senior resident when I was on call, because I was able to bounce a lot of things off of him. What other opportunities do you think is possible for IMGs to do while we were waiting for the match aside from medical assistant? Research can be helpful for that. Again, it all depends on what type of field you're going into, but something that people really value, again, besides scores and besides connections, is whatever research you may have. Okay, let me answer some of the questions that came through. What else can you do to be competitive candidate for IR? This is non-US IMG, scared of the odds. And then what's a good step 1-2 score for IR? I answered that one already. Step 1, currently it's around between 240s and 250s. What fourth year electives are good for IR? You want to do, I would say IR if you can do it. Anything procedural. Anything procedural, again, that shows that you can work well with other people and that you can learn pretty quickly with your hands. But to be competitive candidate for IR, as I mentioned, one of the major things is to be a little, especially research-oriented. Research-oriented is important, especially in very niche fields. If any of you are considering going into a really niche field, even if it's fellowship down the road, this is like you want to go into pediatric GI or even just GI in general. You're thinking beyond your internal medicine training or you're beyond your surgical training. You would be surprised, these people who are interviewing, they all know each other. It is a very, very, very close-knit group of people. Everyone knows everyone or knows someone who knows someone. So getting connected with that person should connect you to someone else. And remember, a lot of you, I didn't have Instagram back when I was applying. This wasn't really a thing. We didn't have all these connections that we all have right now. So use those things. If there's someone you want to connect to, I'm going to write it for you again so you don't have to find it. My IG handle. Use these connections. I did not have access to them. And because I didn't have access, I just had to kind of hustle in my own way, but you have access to people. If there's someone who's a program director or a resident in a program, you know where they are, send them a DM. There are famous, some of you I mentioned, I work with a hip hop organization. There are world famous hip hop artists who I work with. I have tagged them in an IG story. They saw it and they responded. Use this to your advantage. It's happening right now. It's very live. It's a very real story. This member is in an iconic hip hop group. It's based on a TV show right now. And I tagged that person, and I've got the opportunity now to work with that person because I'm an MD and I tagged them in a story, and this person wants to potentially work together. If you know someone in a radiology residency program, or sorry, I'm just thinking about radiology because that person's question, internal medicine, pediatric, whatever, DM them. Everyone knows everyone. Please use that to your advantage. Are you afraid of radiation and interventional radiology? It's amazing doses. Yeah, I try to minimize my fluoro time, but if it's a really complex case, then sometimes it's long. We wear lead. We try to, keep it as low as reasonably achievable. Due to COVID, many of the away or auditioning rotations have been pulled. I feel so bad for that, people who've been through that. Can virtual conferences still be helpful? Yes. This is to answer Sambi's question, but again, if you're missing the in-person experience, do not be afraid. If you can contact that person through email, through DMs on Instagram, through Facebook, whatever it is, whatever form of social media you use, we are all interconnected. That's the very reason this is happening right now. Please send that person a message. You never know. They might feel your story and they might want to respond to you. I've been able to help people that way. People helped me that way. So, okay. What else do we have here? Would you recommend, Tal Khalid asks, would you recommend emailing the PD or clinical coordinator to request for an interview during the application process? Please, please, please do that. Don't hound them now. Just send the message, wait a little bit, maybe a week or two. If you don't get a response, then you can call them. Use a combination of email and phone call. Do not blow up their phones or emails a couple of times a day or a couple of times a week. Then they're going to be a little turned off because you don't want to be desperate. You just want to be reasonable. You want to back yourself with your scores, back yourself with your letters, and then just basically say, I deserve this spot for X, Y, and Z reason. What else are we looking at here? Recently, interventional radiology got a separate residency pathway. Did this transition limited interventional radiology fellowship for diagnostic radiology residents or in the future? That it's separate? No. A lot of programs have something called ESIR, which is Early Specialization in IR. If you're a diagnostic radiology resident and your program has ESIR, then you're going to basically be funneled into the interventional radiology program in your country, in your own program. If they don't have ESIR, then you can try to transition from your DR program into one that does have a interventional radiology program. If it doesn't, then you basically graduate with a DR residency, and then you're going to go into the 2-year separate IR fellowship, as they call it. But if you're trying to do it all in 6 years, then yeah, your ideal scenario is to do IR-DR. That did not exist when I was applying for fellowship. Is being a US IMG giving you a higher chances of matching? It can be. It all depends on what your visa situation is. Some programs, and I'm from the US, even though I'm an IMG, I am a US IMG like you. So yeah, they don't really have to think so much about your J1 and your H1 and all of that, your visa stuff. I know this because my mom is actually a former immigration attorney, so I got to hear a lot about that. But because of that, some programs have a little bit of hesitancy because they don't want to have to go through the sponsorship process, but a lot of programs are open to that. So if you're not from the US, look for those programs who are friendly for non-US IMGs. But if you're US IMG with equivalent scores, they might favor you. I'm not trying to dismay people from applying to these programs, but they may favor that simply because they're just saying, well, we don't have to deal with the visa process and all of that. It's not a deal breaker, but it might actually help you in certain instances. Depends on the program. How to get observership in competitive programs like dermatology. This is asked by Discover Dermatology. I what I can tell you about derm is that it's also one of the most competitive fields in medicine, and to get that can be very challenging. If you don't know anyone in derm, well, it looks like you run a derm page yourself. Look up dermatologists on Instagram and DM those dermatologists and see if any one of them can do that. If whatever school you're at doesn't have a particular connection. If you've gone through all the normal channels and you still haven't gotten a way to do it, just DM someone. I'm telling you, that's very doable. I wish I had that opportunity when I was a student like you, all of you. How many papers should I have before applying for DR or IR? It's not how many papers you have, it's the quality of the paper. You do one paper that gets published in Society of Interventional Radiology and you're first author, that's going to open doors for you. If you're 10th author on 5 different papers and you barely had any involvement and you can't even sell what you did in your application or your interview, no one's really going to care about it. It is a lot more quality over quantity. Should I put my observerships in my CV as U.S. clinical? Absolutely, yeah. It's part of your story. Chances of matching into an IM without research? I don't know your story. It all depends on your scores. Depends on where you're from or where you're trying to go. I mean, I know a lot of IM programs are not so big on research like a lot of the niche specialties, but research only helps provided everything else is good. Thank you for taking the time. Happy to help, yeah. Would you recommend sending a letter of interest to residency programs telling them you'll be ranking high? Oh, I'm so glad someone asked this question. Okay. I'm looking at all of you right now. Whatever residency program you're applying to, whichever one is your number one, tell them they are your number one. For every program who is not, do not call them your number one program. Do not email them or call them and say, I'm ranking you number one. So if you do that to 5 different programs and one of the ones who liked that idea and they were like, oh, I'm glad that so-and-so is ranking me number one, and they rank you number one, even though that was not your actual intention, and you don't match there, they will remember that. Medicine is smaller than you think. Everyone knows everyone, and they will remember the fact that they used up a number one spot on someone who didn't actually want to be there. So what you can do is say to the program who is your number one, I intend on ranking you number one for this reason. This is truly where I see my next couple of years. I'm going to be an asset to your program. This is where I want to be. For the programs who are not your number one, but you really, really want to keep communication with them, you can say, I'm ranking you very highly. Or I can see myself spending the next, however many years in the program. I'm an asset, things like that. Just do not use that specific phrase, I'm ranking you number one, for any program other than your number one. The example I give, it's like dating someone, okay? No one wants to know they're your number two. Don't tell someone, I'm going to rank you number two. I'm going to rank you number three. The person you're dating, doesn't want to know that, they're the second person you ever, really cared for this much, or you're the third. You know what I mean? Like, the person who is your true number one needs to know they're your number one, and that's it. You're fully committed to them. Everyone else, just say, hey, I'm exploring. This is something I could be really open to. Okay? I'm so glad you answered that. That you answered that question, or you asked that question. Chances for matching into pathology without research. Same thing I said about the person who was asking about IM. Same deal. It's just a matter of what your scores are like, who you know, what your letters are like, all the other factors that go into it. I'm sure pathology programs will take people without research, but if research can be the cherry on top, provided everything checks out. Okay. This is a good question. What do I do if I only have one interview? If they ask how many interviews you got, no one is allowed to ask that question. No one should be asking you how many interviews you got or where you interviewed. That's actually technically illegal to ask an applicant that question. If you want to share it, you can, but that's not their place to know. What the person in front of you who's giving you that interview needs to know is that you're there for them, and they're there for you. That's all. But just to also branch off of that, if you only had one interview, I know you're concerned about not matching. You never know. That could be the one place. Tell them that they are your number one, and you never know, that could be the place that takes you. Sometimes all you need is one. But yeah, statistically they say around 10. You need 10 to be able to rank to get the match. People have had less. A lot of people have had more, but you never know if that's going to be your one. But you shouldn't have to show all your cards during the interview and have to say that. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions in the question box, and there's none coming through here. And we've been on for about an hour at this point, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. So a couple of people did ask me. About how to contact me. I'm going to put my personal handle up here. You can DM me, you can follow. I do share stories about, almost dropped my phone. I do share, so I just posted my IG handle again. I do share on my personal page some of my own failures, some of my own success stories, what interventional radiology is, how it's like being a doctor in COVID in New York, all that type of stuff. And I do like to share stories of success when people thought, all the odds were against them, and what you can do when you're on the other side of, when you got those 2 letters behind your name and the sheer number of doors that being a physician opens up to you beyond medicine. Again, I know everyone's thinking about medicine only, but there are so many doors that may open up and so many other career and life opportunities that happen just because of the radiology, just always thinking about radiology, because that's my life right now. But, the residency or the fellowship that you're all thinking of right now, all this will open up after that when you're done, okay? And just so many other things that will open up in your life. And so you can DM me, you can follow, we can engage, and anything I can do to help you, because I want everyone here to actually believe that the story that I just shared with you is not only my own, but it's actually can be yours too, or maybe even better. I wish that for everyone else. So keep doing what you're doing. All the best in your application process and everything as you do to go through this journey. It's a long one, but I can tell you it's worth it. When someone's about to lose their foot and you get to see them the next day and it's saved because of the right medications and the right procedures and all of your training and all the stories that you developed, it made it all worth it. So I hope you have the same opportunities. Everyone have a beautiful night or day or evening or wherever you are right now in the world. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one. Bye.